you guys are probably thinking, what's Wendy and Joe Adamusco going to build next year? What are you guys going to build? You've been looking at all these books and all these warbirds and corsairs and flock wolves. Well, let me tell you. Build a Spitfire, E-I-E-I-O. Is this beautiful or what? I love it. How long does this last? Champ, I gotta tell you, this is for Jimmy and Debbie Borelli, who have just adopted a beautiful baby, and this is for their baby. We're going to their shower tomorrow, so warbirds forever, warbirds and rubber ducks. Champ, you're cute.
Hey, that was Craig. Dinner's at 7. Okay.
I tell you, that is the cutest thing I've seen for anybody that watches these videos. Buy a rubber duck for your wife and she won't complain about the smell in the house.
It's not a rubber duck.
Here we are, we're building one of the most awesome stunt planes of all time. My wife comes down with a rubber duck and says, "Put this on the video, put this on the video." Oh God, and anyway, that is congratulations to Jimmy and Debbie. I love the duck. I'd like to keep him and put him in the cockpit of my plane. Anyway, back. The reason I look at all these books, and God, I have to tell you, these books, I have many of them, and they are all awesome. By the way, that's mosquitoes. Because I'm always trying to drum up new ideas for next year. And there's always something of interest or value or something. There's always ideas to be had. There's always Spitfires. Hey, look at that, more Spitfires. And you have time to spend, you have time to use it dreaming about Spitfires. Anyway, that's one of the things. The books are at all. On the last tape, we got most of this trim painted in segments, and the reason I painted it in segments was it was definitely too cold to paint outside. Obviously it still is. In fact, it's outright freezing, so I've let this go to the last thing of the night, this being the biggest part. And what I'll do is I'll shoot this, open up the door, try to get most of the fumes out, and then hopefully not have the wife kill me when she comes home. She's really taken it very well. She's taken the Spitfire project very well. I have to give her credit. Anyway, we're almost ready to, I'm just getting a final little touch on the lines, and we'll be ready to spray. Now here's something I didn't even know. This is pretty significant though. I still have paint left over, so all of the blue that's on this plane is probably 2/3 of a gun with the coverage I'm getting. Amazing. This is really a good, I know that that's a nice thin coat of paint on there. I'm going to take a break now, get cleaned up, have supper, do family stuff, come back and work on this tomorrow. But I'm going to basically let this dry by a heating vent and give him a kiss goodnight. Boy, he deserves it. Yeah, I've heard if you don't put the dope on right, you can turn a plane into a pretzel. Found him? Even now, I'm getting a couple little touch-up spots in on an ongoing basis. As I see them, there was one down here somewhere too. As I see them, I want to get them taken care of on an ongoing basis, not waiting right to the very end to do all this nonsense. Price. One of the things I did, I wanted to get a little jump on tomorrow's action here. I got the canopy tape moved way back, and I've got, let's see if I can get this on the macro lens, just that little gap, a 64th of an inch each time I move it back. Because this will be the last color, and then that'll be the end of moving that tape. Then we can start building up layers of clear, but we're basically finished here for the night, and I'm going to pick this up in the morning when I have a little more energy, a cup of coffee, and maybe it'll warm up out. Well, it's finally D-Day, or should I say C-Day for Camo Day. I got some of the roundels masked off, and what I did, I took out my book with the Spitfire pictures. Got all the Spitfire pictures laid out there. I have the pigment laid out there. I'm going to have to mix the paint. And I looked at the colors of the pigment that I bought, and they're real close to emulating the version of the Spitfire that I want to do, so I'm going to get busy doing the masking. And assuming President Nixon doesn't call, we'll get this guy painted today. Now these are the two colors that I'm trying to simulate, the green, and there's several versions of this. The green, kind of an olive drabby green, and a gray that has a green cast. So I have those pigments that are real close to being those colors. This should really be very accurate in terms of almost being a scale model too. just looking over all the versions to get some idea. Of course, what my idea is that I'm not sure yet. See, some of the versions are hard camo. This is hard camo, where it has a distinct line. Now, what I may try to do, and I've thought about this last night, is back mask everything so just the camo is showing. Spray the gray, but go right up to the edge. Let the gray dry, 6-8 hours. Then tape off the gray and spray the green so I get the hard edges. But again, I'm going to see how I like it when I do the little spray. I feel like I like the hard edges a little better than the soft edges, but of course Spitfires come in both versions.
I don't pay for the mail. Your committee now me to lunch.
Well, never done it that way.
Or Honda. How the hell they do it? Bring up the way.
This really was a labor-intensive thing. First off, to do camo, I have to have the whole plane in one piece, because as I split the camo out here, I want to split it on right on the flap. Then I'll have to take it all apart and do the hard lines going down through the hinge lines, of course. Now, a couple of things to keep in mind here, and I was giving this a lot of thought. I don't know how practical this is going to be. One of the things I want to do is I want to have the dark color of the green contrast up against the white of the invasion stripes. And I want to have the light color out at the tip, which will accent the tips in, in the sun or whatever. I also want to do dark colors on the outside parts of the stab, because what's happened, it's an optical illusion. The stab is bigger than a scale plane, and this will make it look like it's a shorter span. When you put bars this way, the thing gets shorter. When you put stripes this way, if I was to camo it this way, it would look longer. So I'm going to divide it and try to make the outer parts of it the dark color. So I'm going to mix up the paint next, and of course the same thing here. I'm going to mix up the paint next, get that all mixed up and ready to go. And this is the master plan now after, 4 months of, can't make up my mind like an old woman going shopping for galoshes. I'm finally going to do the gray camo, and I'm going to use the book. I got the book wide open here. Going to do a pretty good simulation of that. Then I'm going to tape off the gray and then take the plane apart and paint the dark green, the olive drab. So with that in mind, let me go mix up the paint and get started. This is the day I waited for a long time. Now what I decided to do is I cleaned both of these guns. You can see my hands are all rotted away. I took this pigment. I'm going to try this as a little bit of an experiment. I had the can that had the original pigment. What I did is I took that color, added just a tiny bit of green to it, so it has a green cast, a little more green cast. And what I did, I made a mirror image of the paint job that's in the book that I like the most. I actually added the olive drab to this color, so now I have for all purposes a custom color. So I added about the amount of pigment in thinner in here, because the last time I did this it turned to chewing gum first. It didn't homogenize the way I wanted to. So what I want to do, and again, we're in the learning curve here. This is stuff, every time you do it, it's an adventure. I want to get all that pigment thinned out before I add the light coat, and then I'll add the light coat and then thin it the amount that I want. Now, there's only one place on this whole plane that there's double paint, and that's the bars right behind the canopy. Virtually every place else has one very thin pigmented coat of paint. And I'd like to finish off the camo. The only place that the camo is going to be double is where I do the faded line and then go back and do the hard masking. There'll be very, I would say there's probably less than 5% of the plane that has double paint on it. You know, and obviously if you're doing a normal stunt ship, this is not necessary. You can use standard, ordinary SIG paint. It's not a problem, unless you want custom colors. But if you want to go for custom colors, I'm trying to go through this as many different ways as possible and pick up as many little tips as I can. And this seems to be a doable thing. And what it allows you to do, you have a choice of about 10,000 different colors instead of 6 or whatever SIG has. And when you go out to the field and you put your red, blue, and green plane down, it isn't the same red, blue, and green that, you know, Joe Bellcrank has right next to you, or Macho Midgley, or, you know, you have kind of a custom thing. Any custom thing, of course, there's always extra work involved, extra risk, whatever. Now, I know this is going to be, the last time we did this, it didn't blend real nice, so what I'm suggesting is always mix this. If you have 2 ounces of pigment, 2 ounces of thinner, and then add the clear. That's the next step up, Ooh, just noticed something. There's still some olive juice or whatever the hell was in this jar. I don't know if I ever mentioned this, but this is true as can be. When I painted the Cardinal Sin, I used a jar that had, I don't even remember what that was, garlic or something in it. And the paint actually wound up smelling like garlic. And when I buffed the plane out, 6 months later, it smelled like garlic. Now I'm going to do, and this is the, keep it this way, this is always a good suggestion. I want to take about 1/4 of this paint. You see how nice and thick it is? Keep it nice and thick. This will be for brush touch-ups later. Put this away. We know what that is. Now this is the paint. I know just by looking at that, well, it's going to have to be thinner than that. I didn't put Flexol, fisheye, or any of that in here. Just going to do this kind of by eye first. Even if I make this too thin, it's okay. Almost out of thinner here. The usual amount, Flexol, would be real accurate. And I drop Old DuPont fisheye killer. Now with this mix, what I hope I'm going to have, this will be a little on the thick side, I'm going to leave this color camo in the gun and leave the other color in the other gun. So I'll have the 2 colors of camo. If I have to touch up, go back and forth. And then we'll be at the end of the colored phase. I'll let that dry out for a day or so. And then we'll begin all the extra little detail work before the clear. So hopefully by the end of today, or at worst tomorrow, we'll have camo. plane drying up by the heating vent. And I can tell you, I wasn't happy with this color when it was in the jar, but now that it's dried up, it's gotten a little darker. It really is a good copy, and it's just green enough. It's just off color enough that I think the dark color will complement it. Now what I'm going to do, and I've oversprayed past where I want to be. I want to kind of get hard lines going in here. This, of course, is going to have to dry. I'm going to go to work, and when I come back tonight, I'm going to work on this again. What I'm going to do is try to get nice hard lines, so I'll really only have double paint under that little overspray area, back mask wherever I want this to be this lighter color. So the plane will have two maskings on it, paint the dark, and then let that dry overnight. But before I leave, I'm going to get the, hopefully, get the paint ready to go, get the gun clean, and get ready to do the dark color. Now before I mix up the dark camo color, this is really the olive drabby color, what I did, I took all of the jars with all of the Spitfire paint, consolidated it into one milk crate, which this is a good idea because now anytime I need to go work on Spitfires, I'll just have everything that relates to the Spitfire in one milk crate. It won't be here, there, and everywhere. And I'll even make a sign on it, don't borrow this stuff unless you intend to give it back. Anyway, I got to fill up my thinner jars empty. Luckily, I'm on the last end of my 3608S. I think I'm just going to make it. I'm going to mix this up, and I hope tonight we'll get to do the dark camo. Now I'm definitely going to do the same thing with the camo, is put the thinner in with the pigment. Now, the funny thing is, now this pigment, is about 1/10 of what's in the normal amount. So you would assume the reason for that is this will cover a lot better. Again, we'll definitely find out real soon. But having all that touch-up paint, boy, if you ever need to touch something up, or, there's nothing to say that Joe won't want to use the paint, or somebody's going to make another Spitfire, or whatever. We'll have everything right in inventory. It'll really be nice. Or maybe I'll make another one next year. But I'll have everything all set and ready to go. Anyway, what the plan is, I'm going to try to get all this mixed so when I get back tonight, I can just, it's a kind of a pain in the ass the way things work out here. Where's my pen? I always have to run, and then I always have to be back at a certain time, and my mother's birthday is coming up. I got to do a gift for her, so maybe I won't get to do this till tomorrow, but either way, we'll find out. Now, that's going to be too thick. Again, the reason I'm doing this over and over again, so many people, this is one of the most common questions in the world. How do I get the same amount of thinner in the paint and get the right pigment and get the right fisheye and Flexol? And once you figure this out, home free all the rest of your life. You only really have to learn it once. And of course, at this point in time, your hands get real nice. Go up and give my wife a hug, and she goes, get those sandpaper hands off me. Oh, your hands are cold. Oh. I bet everybody out there has heard that. Anyway, a week from now, we'll be starting ripping out the bedroom, ripping out the ceiling and everything. And all this paint will be drying. That's where I'm putting the push on. Remember to always leave a little bit of the paint thick. So if you over thin it, you can thicken it back up. It's a big mistake to put it's like mixing cement. Never put all the water in if you don't have some extra, some extra cement. A lesson most people only do once. This looks just about right. Now I'm going to because I have a couple minutes before I got to go, I'm even going to do a test here so that this gun is ready to go, the compressor's ready to go, and all I'll have to do is do my back masking, and I can be dreaming about what lines I want and what effect I want. I'll be all set to go tonight. You can usually tell just by looking at that I'm too thick or too thin. Looks just about right. It's shiny in the middle and a very little fog on the edge, no heavy runoff. You can see I've done all my testing on this beautiful can. Okay, time to go to work. We'll see you in 6-8 hours, whenever. What I'm trying to do is lay out a composite tonight, trying to get my version of the Fantasy Spitfire here. I'm just going to, I only have to back mask off the lighter color, and I can spray the green, and I'll have another night in the bank. And what I'm doing, I'm just scanning some of the books to get a rough idea of just roughly how I want to do this. There's certain criteria I have, and I want to look for all the things that I think I like and make a composite of all of them. Boy, that paint dried up beautifully. Yeah. It works so nice, it's unbelievable. One of the things I want to do now, I want to keep the tip light where it comes to a point. So I'll fade this one in first and mask it off. The idea being I'd like to see the tip as light as possible. It accents how big the pointy the wing is, and the stab the complete opposite. I want the tips dark. Again, the idea of this is to get as much light out at the tip. Now up by the white stripe, I want to have as much of this stripe lines going this way, stripes going this way. It'll make it a little more attractive. It'll set off the invasion stripes. And of course the dark color up in the front. Now where it goes through a hinge line, it's a little bit of a pain in the ass, but something I definitely can live with for now. Again, I'm just trying to line up each and every one of these stripes. I want to double seal all these edges. Again, it really took me right to the last minute to try to make the decision for hard camo or soft. And we finally, after looking at 2,000 pictures, decided on hard camo edges. And of course Spitfires came both ways. The fuselage is a little bit of a dilemma for me because there's so many really nice patterns to choose from. But I know one thing for sure, I want to keep around the cockpit dark so it'll accent, the light color will accent out. I want to keep some white, some of this light color up around the nose so it'll show up on a circle burner field against the trees. Same thing with the rudder, I want to keep a lot of light color out by the rudder if possible. Now this is an old trick, you might be able to use it if you're doing camo someday, is with the tape all laid down, I'm pressing down on here and I can see where the tape leaves its impression. I can see the impression of the tape right here. So what it allows me to do is just trim off the foil, get a real close trim, and the rest I can just fill in with masking tape. So shoving that impression up, that tape impression, well here I don't have a new knife. You need to know, a blade only lasts about 10 cuts here. And see how that leaves you to these complicated shapes. When you're trying to do complicated shapes, this is a big help. No matter what kind of trim job you're doing, that is an excellent tip. I believe I have put that on a tape before, but just in case I didn't. Pressing up through the tinfoil really gives you a nice reference. Now there's some spaces on this blue tape where it's not sticking real well, so. Now I want to also I'm looking at plenty of rudder patterns here. I want to get as much of a light color on the rudder as possible because I'm going to be flying against dark trees most of the time. I think the light color will stand out better. I see by leaving that impression in the tape, I can get a real good track. Look how nice that leaves. And boy, that is an excellent tip. Worth the price of a pizza.
What I also did, it's just one of my little,
Now what I in effect have to do back here, because this is getting too busy and there's too many stripes going through here, I'm going to take the elevators and the flaps and things off, just to give myself a little extra room to get the spray gun, and I can get inside the fillets and things like that in here. And I can also get the angles on the hinge line a lot easier. This is just a step to make it easier. Now what I did is because I'm going around the hinge lines, anywhere I'm going around, I want to get in there and tape that up. So now in effect I can paint this elevator as a separate piece. In fact, I'm going to take, once I get everything laid out, I'm going to take all this as the final pieces and spray these separately. It'll give me a little chance to test the gun too. Now what I'm trying to do is, so I want to paint these parts separate. I want to marry these stripes up, and I want to get them on both sides. It's kind of complicated. It goes around the fuselage. I'll make sure I don't screw this up. Not that I would ever screw anything up. This ass end of the fuselage here is more complicated than I ever expected. It's the most complicated part of the whole job so far. There's so many converging lines here that I want to be sure I don't have a problem. It's taking more time here than I really expected. I want to get this sprayed tonight too. Now the trick is I got to get the rudder on there and make sure I'm matched up. Am I matched? Not really. Good thing I checked this stuff. Okay, I can go from the top of the hinge line. Even the flaps, every step of this paint job, it starts out being, right, it shouldn't be that difficult. And by the time you're done, it winds up being more labor intensive than you can imagine. So if you've never done one of these, or plan on a little extra work, that's all I can say. Even just matching up all these lines is really labor intensive. But I'm sure the final product will be worth it. Even the simplest tape lines have to be matched up. It's amazing. Now, one of the things I overlooked here is by having the flaps and elevators off, I'll be able to get a little bit better paint down into the hinge line, so maybe even all this extra work will ultimately pay off. But it seems like, well, we're closing up on the end. I need to do the front of the fuselage, and it looks like we will get paint today.
the smoke alarm. That's what happens when you forget to take the smoke alarm battery out. Alright, that took less than a half a cup of paint. Probably more like 4 ounces, so I think we're going to be really in good shape weight when we see it. This paint cover's great. I've got the heat pushed back up to 9,000 degrees here. Everything, all little parts drying. Let them cook. Let everything cook. I'll just let the cell air out here for the rest of the night.
In 5 minutes.
Okay, this paint should be dry, and I want to try to get all the tinfoil on the tape edges off.
Color gel for the hard-to-color hair of mustaches and beards. Brush in, rinse out. Eastern Circle. Just to weight ratio craft with a conveyor. No tanks, flanks. System takeoff. On repair, the plane. Need attack during takeoff or landing.
I like that as I pull a tape off like this, any little spot that doesn't look so good, there's a couple little spots,
Surprise attacks against unsuspecting.
and this is a good time to just get a little dot of,
Only realize the danger when
just a dot of paint to cover them up.
For all of them, that day was rapidly approaching. Receiver connected. Live too late. A moment to weaken the drop and variety of it when it became ME2. Easy to fly. First plane for the delay. Because bombers were reconnaissance for its only defense.
This has been sitting by the heating vent overnight. I took and put all the parts together so I can get a little bit of an overview. Now what I anticipated and what I, what really happened, if you want to believe this, there's a couple of spots, I'll get this on the macro lens. Right here, right in the most obvious spot of the whole plane, a chunk of tissue pulled up. Some of that tape, I guess, got a little bit too sticky, or I left it on too long, or whatever. I got 4 or 5 little spots I want to repair, but it's okay because it'll let me demonstrate the repair technique on tape. A couple of my overall impressions here, and I'm going to be thinking about this for the rest of the day, or a good part of the day while I do the touch-up. Now, I wanted to really see, and one of my big concerns was I looked through all the books again last night, of course. There's a certain look I was after in my mind, and there's so many Spitfire choices that almost anything you do would be okay. But I had a certain look in my mind, and I think what happened here is I got real close, but I missed the boat on just a few little items. One of the items I'm not happy with is the blue, the transition of blue along the back of the body. I don't know why, but I just not happy with the way that turned out. So what I may or may not do, first I'm going to make myself a touch-up kit, with all little jars of touch-up paint so I can leave the brushes in them for the whole time I'm working on this from this point on. And what I want to do is look around. For instance, one of the things I might want to do, I don't like the way the white transitions into the light color, so I may want to change the camo so it's dark almost the whole way around, like similar to that. I might want to add some dark color up here. Again, I don't like the way it transitions white to the lighter of the two colors. But I need to put the whole plane together in one piece to get a look at how what I've accomplished here and where I can make it better. Now what I may want to do, in fact I definitely am going to do this, I want to make this transition here come down a little bit lower. Because having looked at the real plane, again go over to the books, the real plane doesn't have half of the body or a third of the body in blue, so I may have to in the back and in the front change that. But here's the beautiful part with a camouflage job. You can change it almost at will. It's real easy. Another thing too I'm realizing, I thought this would look real good in the lighter of the two colors. It would make it look more accented. Not correct. I think it looks better with the tips dark, so I may change some of the camo. So what I'm going to do is spend a good part of the day, most of it off camera. First off, doing all the little touch-ups. I'll make up my touch-up kit, kill all the paint edge lines, and then lastly see how much, if any, of this camo I want to change before I go on to putting any of the final details on the plane. It's funny, I'm turning this thing into an aluminum foil fab. This is a third garbage can full of foil and tape I had. Here's one of the things I want to suggest. Now I buy these jars so that I can put the fisheye killer and stuff in that you normally can't buy in tiny little quantities. But one of the things that's handy to have, and it's nice if you say baby food jars or whatever, is I have little touch-up jars and I have this little container so I can make a row of white, black, blue, camo, dark camo, and I can leave the brush right in it, right for the whole time that I'm working on the plane. This will be a real handy little thing to have. Now I'm going to set that up right now so I don't have those big jars. Now this may seem like little tips that almost don't matter. Believe me, this is one of the things that I find very important. The jar should always have about maybe 1/4 inch of paint in it so that when you just leave the brush in, just the brush hairs stay in the paint. This way you don't have them always drying out. And all through, from now until the point we actually put the clear on a plane, I'll want to have a little touch-up jar like that handy at all times. That's the one color. Now I'll do that for each color, of course. Some of the paint that's a little too thick, I'll put a little thinner in it. The paint that's too thin, I'll let the lid stay off probably for a half a day and it'll be just right. But I'll make a jar for each color. Otherwise you have these big cans, the brush doesn't sit in them just right, and when you're all done you can take thinner and clean all the jars out and put baby food back in it if you really want to be a cheap guy like me. But this is one of the steps that if you leave this step out, you usually wind up spending a lot more time than necessary. Now this paint is a little thick, so I'll put just a little paint, a little bit of thinner in there for touching up. And when you get these little touch-up spots, no matter how careful you are or how, I don't know what the right word is, meticulous, there's always some little spots where the tape pulls up the paint or something isn't just kosher. And this allows you to get it where it's perfect before you put the first coat of clear on, or if not perfect, as good as possible. All of these colors now have covered so well. I can't even tell you, relative to using regular paint, this almost makes regular paint obsolete. And I think I've gone a little bit too far in some ways. I think I could have put a little less pigment and still got the coverage, because this stuff is really chalky. So what I'm going to do is when it's all touched up, spray one light coat of clear on everything. And the only reason for that is so I don't constantly get fingerprints on it. When you have too much pigment in the paint, it dries chalky. So if you see it's dry and chalky, put a little more clear into the mixture, and you won't get that chalkiness. Now this, of course, has no thinner in it, so I just need to put a little bit. Many times I've tried to avoid doing this, and I said, oh, I'll just use the jars. Yeah, and I do, and it's a pain in the ass. The brushes are always full of paint, and you get all over your hands, and by the time you're done, you say, why didn't I just take 10 minutes and do it right? Makes you crazy. Okay, now one of the other nice little tips is I put a little piece of duct tape so I just have enough room for the brush to get in and out. What happens, the paint doesn't dry out, because this is going to sit here probably for a couple of days while I'm doing all my little Mickey Mouse detailing and touch-up work. And at the end of the day, I can obviously just take and put a little more tape on, or go put the lids on the jar if I really want to be crazy. But a brush for each color, I don't have to keep re-cleaning the brushes. So the cost and time here, probably about 15 minutes. I have a little jar of thinner in case the paint gets too thick. I can just peel the tape up, a couple drops of thinner. Also another thing, I have a little palette. This is a windy mailbox that you've probably been receiving your tapes in. Has nice shiny, waxy kind of paper, which is great for a palette if you want to lay out paint and see how thick it is, how thin it is. That's handy too. So with that in mind, I want to go to the plane and start knocking edges down and scraping and seeing how I'm going to change this camo. That's the next step in my little program here. The first adjustment I wanted to make, and I looked at this, believe me, for a long time before I made this. I wanted to get, from the side view, with this blue just looked totally, it looked wrong. I thought it was going to look different than it did. And I'm sure some people out there, maybe if you don't figure it, or if you've never done any oil painting, say, you think you get everything right on the first shot, or you think you know. For instance, I thought the lighter color tips would be more dramatic. Actually, it looks like the dark tips are more dramatic. So, and the rudder too, the dark, I'm going to have to blend in some dark up there somehow. But anyway, making these little minor, whatever you want to call them, adjustments, this is, to me, it's part of doing any artwork. There's no way, I know when George does a painting of a fire engine or whatever, I'm sure in the end he looks, this is too dark, this is too light. And to me, this is kind of like, I know it sounds a little presumptuous, it's like, this to me is a work of art. And it needs some little fine-tuning, some little adjustments here. And now what I'm going to do is sand down all these edges, just enough. I don't want to sand down into filler coat, but just to break the edges. And I have that, actually this will work out good because I have a little body work to do up here. So I can prep this whole area, wipe it down with M600, and then just spray it with the darker color trim. And then while that's drying, I can move on to another step. Now, to give you an idea of just how little paint is on this plane, this is 600 paper. You just touch it, literally just touch it, and you're into the silver. I'm sanding this dry because I don't want the M600 going around under the tape and everything, so I'll just eat up a couple of sheets of paper and throw it away. But boy, it doesn't take long, and you're right there. Now that line, for all purposes, goes away, and I'll work my way right around the line. Now, just thought I'd mention, one of the reasons I did have some of the tape pull up, and it always pulled up right along the edge, never in the middle. The reason for this, I assume, is when I sprayed this, I only went over to where the green was, trying to save double paint. And I think toward the edge of the spray pattern, it sprayed dry along here. So what I'm suggesting is, if I was to do this paint job over, and of course everything is a learning experience, what I might consider doing is spraying a lot further into the green so this was wet and I wouldn't have these little, they're not really, even if you weren't going to repaint it, you hit that with the green stuff and it's done. But just to have it that it's a nicer and neater job, that would be one way we could improve it, is put this further out into the green. For instance, if Joe, I don't think he's doing camo, but not to try to bring it right up to the edge, because that edge gets a dry spray, you don't get good adhesion. That's the problem. All I'm trying to do is get rid of these lines. Boy, even a blue, it just comes right off in 3 swipes of the paper here. Now, one little trick I've been doing, I don't know if I ever put this on video, I always take the material out of the tube, put a little bit out on a pallet, like this box that I've been using. By the way, those boxes are perfect for this. And then use the rubber squeegee. This takes about 5 minutes to dry, and then I'll be able to sand. These are the little spots that I had a problem with. Now, what I'm going to do, I have this all back masked. I'll wait. I'll work on some other stuff in the meantime. And then I'll spray this whole nose dark green. Then when I pull it off, I have lowered that blue stripe, which was the goal of this. I'll decide if and when or where I need to put in the light color camo. It's just one of the things. Had I done this once before, had I gone through this whole program, or had I done a camo before, I would know all of these things ahead of time. But it's a learning curve, and I'm trying to share it with you. Now when you sand it in a little area like this, it's impractical to have the Windex sprayer. So I just saturate a towel with it. That keeps it wet. And I want to have all the edges feathered in. I want complete feathering everywhere. And when I put the paint on this, I'm going to put it on, here's another spot over here. I'm going to put the paint on dry. I'll put a little bit of, remember I saved that little bit of extra paint that had very little thinner in it? Well, this is the reason. Now you can touch this up with relatively dry paint. By the way, one of the things you can look for, I can see that I've done here, the light color camo I didn't have, I had too much pigment in because the paint dried completely flat dry. It should dry with just a little bit of a shine, and then you know you've got it maxed out. Right now, I think this color here has just a little too much pigment in it, and if I was to go back and do it over, I'd obviously, make that adjustment, put a little less pigment in the paint. This, the olive drab, perfect. It's got just a little bit of shine when it dries and covers great. And really the final test here is by feel. When you can't feel these little spots, when you close your eyes, look the other way, and they disappear, you know you've got it. By the way, this is those great little blocks Bob Martin sent in, and boy, they work nice. This is a perfect use for them. Now you can see using this method uses quite a bit of sandpaper, but the result is you get things perfect. And the last thing, when you're all done with the block, just touch this in a circular motion. This way, if you still have a little divot, it'll kind of get it out. Everything by feel. The final thing is by feel. And I think we're ready to spray. Now I'll go mix up some paint, and a couple minutes from now we'll have some paint on this.
The idea here is to spray dry. Obviously, we're going to need more on the white color to cover it than the dark, so I'm going to try to get a coat on that first.
Idea of spraying this dry is you don't want to get a lot of thinner going down in there and loosen it up. You're better off putting it on very, very dry. I was trying to spray this with about 15 pounds of pressure and it took like 5 coats to get it, but it's worth it. Alright, now I'm going to, while this is dry, and work on some of these other areas, the rudder, the wing tips, things, all this paint can be drying at the same time. Now the object here is, I wanted to get the break from where it went from white to this light color. I wanted to make more of the dark color along the break. So what I did, I just masked off an extra little piece of camo here, and I really did like the way the darker tips look better than the light ones. Again, these are the things you learn, so I'm going to mask this off and paint this. And while I have the fuse aluminum foiled off, I can get this done in one shot, make any adjustments to the outer wing, and then while all this is drying, I can work on the back of the airplane. So this way, good time management, I don't lose any time.
I'm putting it on very dry with very little pressure. This is only 15 pounds of pressure, so I'm getting almost no penetration in the paint. And I hope I won't have to go over this with tape, so it won't really matter.
Now here's another one of those little unique tips you can use. I laid out the 1/8" tape. Again, I'm trying to get dark color against light for contrast. And this is the part of the job that you just can't take out of a magazine. There's certain things that look good. After you do them, you say, ooh, I wish I did that. Well, at this point in time, you can go back and make change relatively easily. I lay that 1/8" tape out there, and then I just make a cut less than the thickness of masking tape around it. That gives me the pattern, and it makes like a little island so I can paint in there relatively easily without having 10,000 pieces of masking tape. The less tape I can put on this plane now, the better.
I think when this is done, I'm going to really like the look a lot better. I just did a couple of mistakes I made, but always being able to correct mistakes is almost more important than not making them.
What I'm doing, I'm taking off all the masking tape and tinfoil, but I'm leaving on, I don't know if you can see this, I'm leaving on the thin tape because this really is too soft to take off yet. I'd really like that to dry right to the end of the session or later on in the day. That is still too wet to take off. But by getting the tinfoil off, I can start to get a look at what this looks like with the extra camo. Now this is one of the areas I really didn't like. I don't like the green going to the white any more than necessary, so I'm going to put another little patch of camo in here. And it doesn't have to be big, just so it can break up that white. I don't want too much of that white at any one place. Well, we're almost at the end of our third box of tinfoil, and let's see, with this patch, I can just lay this on top here, take the impression, take it off and cut it, and I'll just lay some towels or something over there, but I'll have that in one cut. Yeah, I like that. See, I like that contrast, the dark to light. This is where having these touch-up bottles comes in real handy. You can just get all little spots as you go around. Mask this part of the rudder off here and get some dark up on the tip. I definitely like the dark tips the best. Now I want to mask this off separately, so I put the tape lines on, and then I can pull the rudder right off. Can paint the rudder separately. I spent quite a bit of time with this, and I'm really convinced that this looks better than the way it did, especially the rudder, the points of the rings and things like that. But one of the things I'm going to have to do, I'm going to have to head down the shop for a while. I'm going to try to get back early so that I can finish the touch-up paint. I want to finish the touch-up paint, and maybe even, actually it's above 10 degrees out there, may even get a little clear shot on some of the parts for a test. The touch-up is the next thing. Now this is great because I got the work done early today. Everything's out at the post office and we're ready, baby. Now this stuff is dried up for a couple extra hours while we were working and running around. I want to make sure I get a nice clean tape break by pulling it back slow, and then I want to finish. I did some of the touch-ups before I went down the shop, but I need to finish the touch-ups here. And actually, it may be warm enough out there I can even get some clear on this today. Now this is where that little touch-up kit really comes in handy. Rather than slopping around with a bunch of big jars, I can get this down to a regularly neat, orderly system. Now here's something I found to be very helpful when you're using tinfoil. When you go on this white or any of the colors that have a lot of pigment, it leaves some little gray stains from the aluminum. Gorms, if you rub it real carefully, paper towel and Gorms, seems to lift it right off. I got most of that touching up done. I'd say we got 90% of it done. What I want to do today, it's a little warmer than it's been the last couple of days. I might even be able to paint some of this outside, I don't know. I'm mixing up, I poured in 2 quarts of clear. This is Sig Light Coat, 2 quarts. And 2 quarts of thinner, that'll be 50-50. So that'll be a gallon of material when it's thinned. Now what I need to do, I need to measure this out in some smaller jars, but the first coat that goes on here I'm going to try to spray just so I get, with all this pigment, and I'm not sure I know exactly how this is going to work out, all this pigment, everything is very dull and very chalky, and I know the reason for that is I probably put too much pigment in